whatever semblance of a championship fight there is in 2025 MotoGP is now very much a brother-on-brother affair, with Pecco Bagnaya's brief resurgence having not really come to anything, and his problems looking worse than ever after Mugello. It's definitely, surely, Marc Marquez versus Alex Marquez for the championship. They're 40 points apart, and they've been 1-2 in more races than I can count this year, including every single sprint. But are they making it too easy for each other? Specifically, is Alex Marquez going too easy on Marc when they're 1-2? And is that spoiling the season? Val, we're going to get into some evidence. We're going to get into why this matters. We're going to get into every other place on the grid where you see people who might not even be brothers helping each other out. Is your gut feeling that Alex goes easy on Marc, though, before we really dig into the specifics of this?
It's a qualified yes, is my gut feeling. My gut feeling is a qualified yes that I don't think is the deciding factor in what we're seeing in 2025 and how we're seeing it play out. I think it's the kind of going easy that you would maybe see between two teammates, of which only one is fighting for the title or neither are fighting for the title. It's kind of maybe the kind of going easy that Ducati preaches as having within its camp between all of its riders, but certainly some of your Ducati peers are friendlier to you than others, and there are none of them friendlier than the Marquez brothers to each other. So yeah, yes, but a qualified tentative yes, and it's not a scandal. It is interesting, but it's not a scandal.
No, but it could be problematic, even if it's not a kind of... They're not sitting at home colluding on who's going to win which race. Alex isn't automatically backing out of the way if Marc comes through. But when we've had a couple of years of Works Ducati versus Satellite Ducati title fights with Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin very clearly not going on easy on each other, this is the same relationship in the way it's a satellite bike versus a factory bike, and it does seem to have naturally less needle in it. Now, to me, this doesn't seem like a kind of dodgy collusion in any way. It feels more like it's a kind of natural point in their careers and their situations that Alex is going to be content to bank second places at a point in his career where he spent his whole career so far being seen as inconsistent, throwing results away, too unpredictable. He's got a bike he can trust. He's riding high in the championship. To me, if he's backing out of the odd fight, that seems more like he's trying to make sure he still stays as high up in the points as he is in this kind of amazing breakthrough season he's having than necessarily going, I need to get out of my big brother's way. But I still suspect his big brother is naturally in his head. You know, Alex knows Marc better than anyone else in the grid does. The rest of the grid knows Marc is a pretty awesome talent who's hard to beat. Alex must have a big shadow in his mind every time he sees Marc looming behind him, that maybe Marc is even more in Alex's head than the rest of the grid, whether they're kind of actively working together or not.
I don't think so, no. I think there's an understanding going on between the two of them as to the role they're currently playing in the championship. And again, that's not to describe it as orchestrated, but I think the way Alex spoke about it after Mugello made it pretty clear that there's a deliberate strategy going on to where he is maximizing the amount of points he is scoring rather than minimizing the amount of points his title rival is scoring. Like we've seen some pretty elbows out moves from Jorge Martin last season on Bagnaia, as you mentioned. I think there was one in particular that basically gifted a race win to Enea Bastianini when at turn one he just ran him out wide. And we've seen this season in certain moments Alex specifically refusing to do that to Marc. So the points Alex is looking at right now are the points he is scoring rather than the gap he has to Marc. And it's because I think he is still treating the season as there's an air of inevitability that the Works Ducatis will sort it out and make the jump to where the GB24 cannot match them consistently enough. Plus, Marc is just generally quicker, and that comes into it. So for Alex, the understanding is I just score as much as I can, and if Marc gifts me something somehow by crashing out and leaving big points on the table, that's how I come into play. But I don't really. It doesn't come from me roughing him up. It is just to quote Alex directly. The people are saying you don't attack him in the same way. When he's the fastest, you can't. You attack the riders in front if they are slower. If they are faster, you don't have the opportunity to overtake. Now, the question there is whether Alex has been a little, I don't want to say too keen, but too ready to accept in so many of the races that he just doesn't have the answer for Marc. There is something to gain from that acceptance, because that then allows you to run your own race. The tire life is not unlimited. We've seen Pecco Bagnaia at Mugello show that it is not unlimited if you go gung-ho in the early laps and then suddenly at the end you've got nothing left and you end up losing points. And when you're racing for yourself rather than racing against the one championship leader, that's the situation you're going to be in. You're going to just try to pace your own race. We know that Marc and Alex kind of sort of discuss the strategies during the weekend of how they're going to play the races, who's going to gun it at what moment in time. They're not doing like a cycling thing of teammates, but they do talk about what the smartest approach to the race is. They don't really it doesn't seem many secrets from one another. It's a strategy that seems to benefit both of them. The question there is whether it maximizes Alex's chances at a rider's title, but that's a question for him to tackle.
And essentially, those are the conversations they've always had since they've both been racing, whether they've been in the same part of the grid or even the same championship. Sometimes it's almost like they haven't adjusted for the fact they could now be full-on championship rivals, and then maybe they do need to keep a few more secrets from each other. The key thing for a lot of observers, though, is that's fine if Alex is racing Marc like that, but is he racing everybody else like that as well? Is he more aggressive when Bagnaia is among them, when any of the other Ducatis or Fabio Quartararo is around as well? You've been digging through the evidence a little bit, Val. What is your sense of how Alex actually races versus Marc compared to everyone else?
So the complication there is the sample sizes are shockingly uneven, because it is genuinely, just going back through it, it is ridiculous how much time they've spent together on track this season, which is credit to Alex. It's the credit to the season Alex is having. He's having a fantastically performant season, which means he's up there all the time, which means like whenever you switch on the Alex on board, and I've watched a lot of it today, there's a chance of the red Ducati being right in front. And then you watch it how Alex is dealing with it. Again, I've mentioned the thing with the turn one that he wouldn't do what Martin would do to Bagnaia, specifically, I think in Argentina. If you look at the start, he could have probably run out Marc wide if Marc was known as the sort of the guy with the dominant pace, but then that could have also backfired against Alex's race. The moves that Alex has been backing out of, or like it's either him backing out of moves that are only like 40% on, or maybe 50% on, but it's moves that, for instance, at Mugello, coming through turn 2, 3, we saw him gun it against Bagnaia in ways that I don't think he was quite doing against Marc, just because, again, admitting it post-race, I think he believed Marc's pace was there to go away, but Bagnaia he had to be in front of consistently and not cook his front tire behind, so there was an extra urgency to that. I don't think it's necessarily personal, I think it's strategic, and the racing there was completely clean. They've both lunged each other a few times, Marc and Alex. It's not been anything particularly aggressive, but it's not like a total, what do they call it, entente cordiale or whatever, like that they don't fight each other, they don't engage. That's absolutely not true. At Le Mans, we saw Alex go through on Marc, then sort of end up through circumstance behind Marc and take it a little bit easy in the sketchy conditions when the rain was falling, which is also a little bit understandable. I think Qatar is the big one for me, like the only notable case where some of Marquez's Ducati peers can look at it and say, I don't know about that. And it was the Grand Prix, and you'll remember it as maybe like the worst race of Alex Marquez's season, or at least one of his worst blunders, is where he sits behind Marc early on, and you can tell that he's tentative and not really too worried about getting ahead, and that his strategy and his interest is clearly just following Marc for as long as he can and maximizing his race result through that. Then briefly, because Marc isn't so quick in those early laps, that leaves him vulnerable to Fabio Di Giannantonio attacking. And immediately, like at the first opportunity, Alex tries to get the place back at turn 12. It is a ridiculously bad move. It ends up ruining Di Giannantonio's weekend. It effectively ends up writing off Alex Marquez's race. There's no chance he goes on for that move if it's Marc. I'm very confident of that. That was just all around not good for anybody involved. I think for the most part that double standard isn't so evident. I know a lot of people will have seen it through the Mugello races. Not totally convinced. I don't think they particularly were actively too rough on Bagnaia. Maybe they're giving each other more margin, but even like you go 3 wide into San Donato, right? You can't actually tell where's Bagnaia and where's Marquez, which of the two factory Ducatis around you is the right one. There's one point where Alex sort of forces them both quite wide to the outside, and I'm confident in that moment he had no idea which one of them was Marc and which one of them was Pecco. How do you know? You can't tell. He doesn't have the sight line, and even if he did, you can't tell in that split second. So I think it's a characteristic. I think it's a deliberate strategy. It's also part of an alliance. Don't think it's an issue.
No, it's if anything, it's that Alex has decided this year he will not sacrifice results if someone he cannot beat is around him like that. And it just happens that the only guy he cannot beat right now is his brother. Now, I said at the outset that this isn't the only kind of collusion-ish alliance we see on the grid. We've seen plenty of siblings racing in MotoGP, but Pecco Bagnaia himself, when asked about this, said it's similar to how I race against other people from the VR46 Academy, and there's loads of those. So, Pecco is racing differently effectively with Frankie Morbidelli, with Marco Bezzecchi. This whole generation of Italians who've grown up together are kind of, from the way Pecco puts it, racing conscious of having grown up as kind of friends/siblings in the Rossi gang/teammates. On a separate note, last year we saw Aleix Espargaro defending like hell to protect his little brother, as he calls it, Jorge Martin, in a title fight. So to me, that's maybe more worrying if you've got kind of different alliances forming around the grid that aren't even siblings. Another part of me thinks some people just get on better with others, and that's going to come out sometimes in how they compete against each other in the sports they participate in.
Yeah, I think it is part of the game in a way. It is part of what we enjoy about motorsport, is the alliances and the relationships and how they play out in the game theory on track. And I think, honestly, whatever is going on with the Marc Alex situation, and I don't think much is going on, it is less substantial than what you just described, which is, people from other teams, from other manufacturers even deciding that they're going to actively not interfere in the title fight, or even try to help out their guy when their only relationship is outside of the realm of work. Let's make this clear. It's not Alex running rear gunner for Marc. Marc does not need that this season. No. This is not like old team orders, etc. championships where you just send your lead guy to the front and have the others protect him. No, obviously not. Marc does not need the help. It is just their mutually beneficial, and I think implicit, probably unspoken, but maybe spoken, understanding that, they leave each other a fair bit of room. I also noticed a couple of incidents across Aragon and Mugello where Alex just does not fight attacks at the end of the main straight. He just goes, yep, see ya, go, whatever. And you can excuse it through his understanding that he doesn't have the pace to fight Marc. If his primary mission was defeating Marc in the championship, then that's not on, because you need to make sure Marc loses points. But they've decided they're not going to fight the championship that way. They've decided that Alex is going to score consistently as he can, and Marc is going to do the Marc thing, which is that, on the average weekend he wins, but sometimes he loses 25 points and the game is on. Right now it looks to be going Marc's way. During the press conference at Mugello, they were asked the question, I think Marc specifically was asked the question, whether Alex was a real title threat or whether he was Sancho Panza from Don Quixote, which was taken remarkably well, given the phrasing of the question, because that's the kind of thing that I think could prompt a walkout in a different sort of atmosphere. I think that's just the understanding that exists. Alex knows that to win this championship, making an enemy of his brother, doing a feud with his brother, is not actually his best route, even if it maybe makes some mathematical sense sometimes. His best route is just try to hunt on the margins and capitalize consistently and just hope that the quicker guy doesn't finish.